say that social changes related to family and childhood influenced the growth of organized sports in the US?
Well, organized sports have existed for a long time in the US, and, they were formed way back around the turn of the 19th century and 20th century. And during the progressive era, between 1900 and 1920, organized youth sports were developed, and they were developed basically to take immigrant kids and turn them into good little productive Americans who were loyal, patriotic, and could serve in the military and could serve in work in the factories and so on. And then schools adopted organized sports and incorporated them into their programs. But the real popular organized youth sports didn't really develop until after the Second World War in the United States. And they were basically developed in suburban areas where there were a lot of open spaces, and parents saw organized sports as a great way to socialize their sons, not their daughters at that time. And so they created all these different kinds of leagues in various sports, the American sports predominantly, baseball, basketball, football, volleyball. All of those sports were created in the United States, and they were modifications of sports that came over from Europe. And the sports at that time were not that serious. I mean, some adults took them seriously, some kids, but they were more recreationally oriented. And organized youth sports really didn't start to become real competitive until the 1980s, when there was kind of a perfect storm for creating highly competitive organized sports. And some of the things that were going on at that time were, first of all, there were a lot of families in which both parents were working. And so they needed something organized, adult supervised to put their kids in during the summer, during vacations, after school, and so on. And also, there were major changes at that time about what it meant to be a good parent. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of historical background on that. Ronald Reagan, this is for people who are not old enough to remember the 1980s, which is probably most people who are going to be watching or listening to this. And Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980 and took the presidency in 1981 in January. And during his inaugural speech, he pointed out that after he started talking about the problems in the United States, he said that basically government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. And then a few years later, he said the 9 most fearful and dangerous words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And
I remember that.
Yeah, and at the same time, Margaret Thatcher in England, who thought very much like Ronald Reagan when it comes to politics, said that there was no society, there were only individuals and their families, and individuals and families had to take care of themselves first. So this whole notion that government is a problem and that families had to take care of themselves first was symbolic of major political changes and shifts that were starting to occur during the 1980s. There was a big anti-tax movement in the United States. People were against taxes, felt that taxes were too high and that government was too big. Mm-hmm. So what happened was taxes went down, government couldn't maintain the programs that they had. And one of those programs were these organized youth sports that park and recreation departments were not just providing spaces for, but they actually organized the programs. But their budgets got cut, and and the programs started to fade. And at that particular time, parents with resources thought we better get going and create our own programs. And parents did, but also there were what I call youth sport entrepreneurs who entered the scene and said, we're going to create the best kinds of sport programs that your kids could participate in. We're going to emphasize skills and excellence. We're going to make sure that the programs are really structured, that your kids are going to move to the next level and be able to compete and be successful. And by the way, they're going to be successful in life too. We're going to prepare them to qualify for scholarships in college, maybe even professional contracts. And we want you to start these kids early in highly specialized programs so that they really learn a sport. And in order to get parents to buy into that, they had to convince parents that specialization was the way to go. Uh, and the reason they had to do that was they were making their living in youth sports, and they needed parents to be paying dues 12 months a year. So they created this whole narrative that justified not just specialization, but early childhood specialization, starting at 6, 7 years old and going all the way through adolescence. And so that was a major change in the way youth sports operated.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments. And join in the conversation around this topic and more in the forum.